Michelle Charters, OBE, is the head of the International Slavery Museum here in Liverpool, which is part of the National Museums of Liverpool, the NML. Michelle is leading the museum through a £58 million redevelopment project, which also includes the Maritime Museum, that aims to make the venue a global leader in the understanding and exploring the impact and legacies of historic and modern slavery. Prior to taking on this post in January 2024, Michelle was also a trustee of the NML from 2018 to 2024. Her past roles include being Chief Executive Officer of the Kuumba Imani Millennium Centre, the founding chair of the Merseyside Black History Month group, and the first female black trustee of the Liverpool Everyman and Playhouse theatres. Michelle received her OBE recognition for her important and long-standing work with the communities in the 2024 King's Birthday Honours. Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane, and thank you all for coming today. So I'd like to start by saying, and first and foremost, we're trying to do this in a different way in terms of images, but I'd like to say thank you to Research Libraries UK, its funders, sponsors, and all the attendees this morning for the honour of allowing me to share with you my journey, a community's hope, and the work of National Museums, International Slavery Museum, over the last 3 decades. To you, this slide shows a picture of a well-known waterfront in Liverpool, but to me, this is a sacred place that up until 1994 hid the true history of these docks and the city's involvement in one of the worst crimes in human history, transatlantic slavery. I was born in Liverpool in 1962, and I have many fond memories of the many visits I had to places like the World Museum and Liverpool's public libraries as a youngster with my brave, single parent mother who wanted to ensure that her children knew about history and heritage. At that time, I loved walking through those impressive venues that held objects and archives of the past and opened my eyes to the global world, with some of its heritage and parts of its history. However, what I would learn later was that it was a rarity for people like me due to the racism and discrimination we experienced in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and the noughties. The city centre was a no-go area for us as a community, which brought the stark reality of us as a family visiting these spaces as extra special, but also brave for my white mother and her young family at that time. However, all of this would not really hit me until I started my own Black history and community activism learning and personal Black history research in 1979, whilst in my first role as a community development worker in the Charles Wotton Centre, and later as I entered the Access to Education project in Toxteth to later participate in formal higher education. It was then that the truth of my community's existence in a city like Liverpool and the ongoing impact of our exclusion would galvanise me to want to be part of the change that I wanted to see. For all those who had suffered via the lack of education, the hidden history, the hidden research, economic and social opportunities that to us was important in this city and in those venues. Little did I know that 15 years later, my commitment, understanding, and vision for hope would expand to link me back to the museums and the formal libraries, as well as our own informal community learning projects like Elamu Wanani, which later became the Ofsted-registered Elamu Academy. I continued in my quest, alongside my beloved community's search for the uncovering of our truth and a deep desire to promote what we would unearth as the hidden history of our ancestors' journey, our city's prolific involvement in this part of our history, and the ongoing impact on us via the continuous research and curating of objects and stories that could be shared. Today, I will share with you the journey, the story, plus the progress and commitment and involvement of National Museums Liverpool, its partners like Liverpool Central and Toxteth Libraries and the Liverpool Records Office, who together worked hard with us and others to build on a shared vision of exposing those truths of our existence. All of these achievements were to ensure that the past would be uncovered, research would expand our knowledge, and that together we would support each other to develop a museum and partnership projects that presented new knowledge and new ways of working with institutions and sectors. Importantly, this approach and that work started a programme of development and learning of this subject, which is still painful and impactful on so many across the globe to this day. Well, it worked. Sorry, so excited. So Liverpool, as you may or may not be aware, is a city that grew from its involvement in transatlantic slavery and brought with it immense growth, city development and wealth to the merchants and their families, as well as the slavery economy companies in sugar, cotton and tobacco. Over many years during that period, and a perfect example of that is how Liverpool's population growth went from 1,250 in 1650 to 80,000 people in 1800. During the 1740s, Liverpool actually overtook both London and Bristol, and at one time was the second largest participant in the UK in this horrendous part of its history. Liverpool today is still home to the longest continuous established black community presence in the UK, with African and later Caribbean representation of over 300 plus years. And we know this ourselves here when we look at a grave memorial in St. Nicholas's Church by the docks of Abel, a slave who was buried there in 1717. But it would take until 1994 when NML bravely, and I do overstate the bravery of it at that time, developed the Transatlantic Slavery Gallery exhibition in the basement of the Maritime Museum, which at that time was a major statement, not only in the city, which was steeped in the benefits of this trade, but also for a national UK museum who decided to expose this truth. This work and that gallery provided an insight via its objects, archives and stories, which brought the facts of our ancestors' journeys and pain and the black community's history to life, of which many of us had only read about in books. This gallery exhibition made me personally commit even more to wanting to uncover our truth and to continue to participate as a volunteer for a further 13 years in between 1994 and 2007, but then which actually extended to 30 years up until 2024, and in the continued development and the change that we needed to see. That gallery exhibition created a momentum of galvanised action from many members of the community, alongside the commitment from their NML staff and its board, who all wanted to see a more permanent space so that the uncovering of our truth could continue. 5 years later, however, Liverpool City Council in 1999 also made a public statement when they publicly apologised for the city's role and the part that it played in transatlantic slavery and this horrendous trade. So during this time, the ISM curators and other NML teams continued to drive this acknowledgement, commitment and ongoing research, as well as be involved in the collaborations, co-production and the pure determination from the local community to work with external institution partners, as well as academics, historians and scholars. And all of that work culminated in the continuation of more work for the next 8 years. This work and that approach would lead to the development of that dream that was eventually realised when in 2007, International Slavery Museum opened as a national museum on the 3rd floor of the Maritime Museum. This was very significant to many, but especially to me, because it took our story out of that original basement gallery and placed it prominently on the 3rd floor of the distinguished Maritime Museum, which, when you think about it, was really appropriate, especially when you think about Liverpool and transatlantic slavery. It's important to recognise how the sea, the river and the docks are all linked, to continue to tell the maritime, transatlantic slavery and people's stories. For us at NML, we're really lucky in that we can appreciate and plan how to further that history and those truths today, by also linking with the Museum of Liverpool, which opened in 2011 on the waterfront, so that all 3 museums, which are housed on the same sacred site, but which are all different but linked, can share in the truth-telling of that space. You may ask, why is this a sacred site? What's Michelle talking about? Well, it's because the 2 graving docks, now known as the Canning Docks, right next to our 3 museums, were at one time the repair docks of the many slave and Liverpool ships who were responsible for shipping approximately 1.5 million Africans across the globe at that time. Oops. To bring you up to date, and over that 30-year period, the museum, its partners and the community have continued on a journey of listening, learning, understanding and change. For the museum, it was a new way of working while sharing the complexities of museum practice with a community who were not represented and up until 1994 had little or no knowledge of museums due to the exclusion of their involvement or their stories or both. Whilst it has been a slow process, many positive changes were to come. This work would introduce a new method of collaboration and engagement, which included representation at board level, which showed commitment from the top. Growth in staff representation across our departments due to the development of a new recruitment strategy that we devised 5 years ago, and where the percentage of black staff now stands at 11% in national museums, which has a total of 640. The expansion of the Respect Group, who were made up of all representatives from all sectors as well as the community, and who originally started as a steering group with a focus on just supporting our annual Slavery Remembrance Day, of which we have co-organised and produced our 25th anniversary last year, and we're going into our 26th year. This group would expand its reach and its impact to review other key elements of our overall portfolio and our museum practice. And all of this, as well as the introduction of 6 community stakeholder groups involved in representation and decision-making in the areas of research, education, community engagement, maritime links, and youth involvement, have helped to shape the approaches introduced to ensure a good model of practice for the museum as well as its partners. We also, with the support of Leeds Beckett University, developed and established a community co-production strategy that is enforcing all we do, especially in relation to the development of International Slavery Museum and the Maritime Museum and our upcoming multi-million-pound waterfront transformation. Jane said it was 58, it's actually now 80 million for ISM and Maritime and 20 million for the rest of the waterfront. So it's a £100 million project. And last year, we co-designed and developed our commercial black business in Museums Steering Group, who will support NML in creating, understanding and opportunities for access and inclusion of black arts and crafts, cultural food and services in NML venues across the city, of which we've got 7. Not only has this amazing transformation of museum practice within NML, alongside the consideration, review and implementation from our many partners and the community being delivered for over the last 3 decades, but more importantly, the programmes, the projects and the partnerships have either been responsible for, led on, or participated in real change for understanding of this subject to a much wider audience and between our sectors. This change has put NML, and especially the vision of ISM, onto a wider platform for change for both institutions and communities, locally, nationally and internationally. And NML's current projects or partnership programmes include the following. 1, the Centre for the Study of International Slavery, which is an international research partnership between National Museums and the University of Liverpool, and which was established in 2006. And I, in this role today, am a co-director of this established partnership, which we have reviewed over the last year since I've been in post. And following this review, we are committed to a further review of the research and the events that have been conducted over the last 20 years in order to gauge its impact and prepare for its future offers. Number 2, our Transatlantic Slavery and Legacies in Museums Forum, which was established in 2021 and is a key partnership programme alongside Black Cultural Archives, Bristol Culture, Glasgow Life, Hull Museums and Galleries and London Museums. And all this shares, that partnership shares and collaboratively develops best practice and networking globally in terms of collections, engagement, people and advocacy. To date, we have 505 subscribers from across the UK, mainly representing museums, libraries and heritage organisations, but also related community organisations and higher education institutions. And the Connector programme is a programme where we recently received £1 million grant to enable participatory and practice-based research through a programme of bursaries and capacity building, as well as creating a virtual home where resources will be accessible and live sharing and exchange can take place. The Connector project will see the establishment of the International Research Network of Global Partners, led by NML in association with Lloyd's Registration Foundation, and this work will begin this year. The 4th thing is the Maritime Museum, which is a key partner to the Centre for Maritime History, which ensures the links are connected between maritime research and development and stories and practice of its network partners to ensure that up-to-date information and shared practice is developed continuously. And the Sites of Conscious, we are an institutional partner that allows NML to be involved and linked into the global membership of this important network in order to be aware, share good practice and ensure joint collaborations are continuous. I am especially proud of this next project that we have developed, and that is the introduction of the International Slavery Research Panel that has been developed. It was developed in December 2024, and it's to bring together the transatlantic slavery specialists from across the UK and the globe, who will all come together and work with our curatorial team to ensure the rigour and the accuracy of the story briefs of each object and case display that we are considering for the new gallery opening in 2028. All of these programmes, projects and initiatives will feed into that £80 million redesign and redevelopment of International Slavery Museum and Maritime Museum buildings and its infrastructure, which is the cornerstone of the work that will feed into the £20 million waterfront transformation project, which will house a permanent installation in one of those graving docks, and that will be a contemplation space by Fiesta Gates, the American artist, in our sacred canning dock, that, as I stated previously, once housed the repairs of the many slaver ships, and which has been witness to so much of our maritime history, its horrors and celebrations in these docks throughout the centuries. Our new projects. When you consider that all of this work began as a vision from the few, but gained support and momentum from so many, you realise that this was some feat. From that first gallery exhibition in the basement of the Maritime Museum to our recently received, successfully, planning permission on a Grade 1 listed site for the new entrance to our own museum building in the Royal Albert Docks. This is beyond what we expected 30 years ago. This redesign and redevelopment of two key national museums will be fitting for the transatlantic slavery, maritime and people's stories via the ongoing archives, the research, the content and the objects that you will see in the future, and which our libraries and universities will play a huge part in. All of this will transport our visitors, partners and stakeholders into an experience that not only clearly tells the truth of our history, its impact and its collective approach to where we are today, but it will also share that vision of hope for tomorrow. For us and me, we are at the next stage of International Slavery Museum and Maritime Museum's journey of separation but connection in our stories, content and exhibitions for future visitors. We close both museums this year, and the teams and I will continue to drive the momentum, uncover more truths, network and collaborate with so many for when we reopen in late 2028 or possibly 2029 if it goes a little bit over. It better not go over more than 2029. This will be a very special year in that International Slavery Museum will finally have its own building with an impressive entrance, and the Maritime Museum will finally get a full redesign for the first time in the last 40 years. We will also develop new programmes as well as host a very special global curatorial programme that has been 4 years in the making and production in partnership with the National Museum of African American Heritage and Culture in Washington, D.C., as we host a final exhibition in that year as well. This slide shows you that this is not going to be a traditional museum, because the work and the contribution of so many over the last 3 decades has brought us to this day, where we can consider and design our new living and breathing museum that creates a cyclical journey of curation, partnerships and collaborations that continue on the uncovering of those objects, archives, shared opportunities and primary sourced evidence of what will be housed in International Slavery Museum, the only museum of its kind in the world dedicated to transatlantic slavery. We are developing the basement of the new building into the International Slavery Museum Research Lab, whereby curators, historians, academics and scholars can sit alongside members of the Black community who may not have had any experience in any of those roles, but whose lived experience will be vital for the rigour of this work and hopefully a gateway for them to pursue these avenues of expertise as potential career options for them in the future. The work uncovered in this area can feed directly into the galleries and the projects of International Slavery Museum, and then it'll be fed into the National Centre for Teaching Black History, which will be the ongoing work of our respected learning and participation team, which will be housed on the second floor in their designated learning and community space. This work will also feed into the offer of the Transatlantic Slavery and Legacies in Museums Forum, and they really do need to change that title, it's a bit long, but to be shared virtually and widely across the sectors and across the globe. And when you visit, you will not only explore our museums, but you can continue onto our public realm of that waterfront, where you'll be able to visit our contemplation space, or you may wander around the array of cultural food and our craft musics markets that will take place throughout the year. NML and ISM are also very, very proud and privileged to host In Slavery's Wake as the only UK museum partner in the UK and Europe of this very important transatlantic global cultural initiative of such importance. I will say to you all, it's not been the easiest of journeys, and we still have a way to go. But I believe that you can dream big, you can achieve against the odds, and the best ingredients for success, little or large, is to be true. Listen to each other. True to what you believe in by opening those doors, having those discussions, listening to each other, learning from each other, and recognising that whilst history that was hidden is coming to light, we should not be afraid to continue on this journey together. Every single one of you today, here today, represents the best in your sector. You lead institutions that are often the first link to both formal and informal education for individuals, families, and communities. Your buildings and institutions are filled with books and archives from many centuries, and the work of uncovering truths and promoting new shared experiences and opportunities is key to the relationships with local organisations like Writing on the Wall here in Liverpool, which shows that slowly but surely the libraries too can create and develop a better understanding and access to those who historically may never have felt it was a place for them just 3 decades ago, but whose work and contribution is of the utmost importance, especially in terms of learning from each other, sharing new, unique opportunities, and catering to all. Your skills and experience can too leave an impression on someone else like me, who stands here today, glad for those national museums and our library teams of the past, who will never know the impact that their work had on that young black girl, local, who 5 decades later will go on to head a museum that is so special to so many. And I wanted to share these last few images and a video Joe. But I wanted to share it with you because I want you to see the overview of that vision and the hope, and I hope that hopefully you will be involved on this journey with us. So that's the front, that's the first entrance. That was the hardest thing to get. That's Royal Albert Docks. Nothing's ever been built on there other than those warehouses. We did it. And as you can see, it's quite impressive. And there was a little bit of going backwards and forwards, but we did it. And that's another story. But this is the importance of what you'll see. That whole building, the old Granada Studios building, is now going to be the front door and the building of International Slavery Museum. The basement will be taken on another kind of vision because it's going to be continuous. It's not going to be a temporary exhibition gallery space in a basement of a building ever again. The link bridge will link you from that building into that first floor of the Maritime Museum, so we will still keep that connection. And people have said to me, oh, Michelle, don't you need to get rid? Wouldn't you have liked your own building? I said, we have. We've got our own building in the right place. So that's really important. But overall, I would just like to say thank you so much for listening. And we're going to finish, Joe, with our little quick video. Thank you.
What we want to create is a museum that excites people to get involved in this journey with us.
So both buildings are in need of transformation. Part of this project is to really bring them alive again.
This is a real opportunity to sort of take the museum forward, to really transform how a maritime museum can tell stories.
This project is amazing in the way it tells the story of Britain's maritime history in tandem with its role in the transatlantic slave trade.
The new entrance to the International Slavery Museum is going to be the real emotional moment. It opens that door to that truth of a hidden history. It's a remembrance, a recognition of our enslaved ancestors.
The entrance pavilion boldly announces the International Slavery Museum to the world. It has intricate ironwork which allows views into and through it from the existing building. It's not there to obliterate what was there, but to act as the missing layer of history.
What the atrium does is it's opening it up, not only that space, but it's opening up this subject. To walk in there, they'll get a sense of what they're ready to see, but it'll be bright instead of it being dark. It shines a light on the story.
So the North Vestibule will really change the way that most visitors arrive at the Maritime Museum. It'll open up that kind of welcome space on the ground floor. It'll just mean that the arrival for visitors is a much clearer and simpler and enjoyable experience. The South Vestibule really will change the relationship of the museum to the colonnades, and that's a space that can feel almost a bit neglected and a bit overlooked, and it will give the museum a presence on that kind of inner part of the Albert Dock as well.
What the new museum will give us is space to tackle the issues that are important. The learning journey that people need to go on, both young and old, will be facilitated within the learning and community engagement space.
It's vital for the museum that we're able to host events. An important part of that is the lecture space. The designs have come through that will transform that space in a way that just makes it much more welcoming, much lighter in tone.
So the galleries of both museums will be revamped and redesigned. We're revitalising the exhibitions, really making sure that they're current, but most importantly that they're flexible and they're able to change.
The international nature of Liverpool as a port means we can tell a really specific local Liverpool story with a meaning and a relevance that still matters to someone who's maybe never even been to Liverpool before.
I'm more excited, I think, than anybody to walk through that gallery, to tell stories that would not have been seen, to create a journey through a gallery that's going to be very, very different.
The link bridge is designed to be a beautiful pause point on the journey through the museums. From there, the visitors will see panoramic views of the docks and understand that the stories that they're learning in all these exhibitions aren't far off narratives, but happen in the place that they stand.
You can't put a full stop on transatlantic slavery. It's a very hidden history. This next stage is the important stage. It gives us our real space, and it offers us the opportunity to take 30 years of work and put it into a building.
You can't tell the maritime history of Liverpool without talking about that trade in enslaved people from West Africa. Equally, you can't talk about transatlantic slavery without talking about Liverpool. Having two museums in one building is unusual, but it's absolutely necessary for the stories that we're telling.
There's a gap in our public consciousness about what happened. There's a gap in our understanding of who we are in Britain and in the world. And this museum is going some ways to addressing that, to teach people, to offer a platform to bring people to have these discussions. The world needs this museum.
Gosh, Michelle, I hope you can feel kind of the silence and the respect in the room for what you've just said to us, both your work and the work of your colleagues as well.
And the community and the sectors.
Yeah.
When you look at Liverpool as a city, you know, it's took a long time for us to get here, but we've got here. And the most important thing is that it continues, that this momentum. I think like places like Central Library, they've been doing amazing work over the last couple of years by working in partnership with communities. The Athenaeum, the old gentleman's club where merchants actually went and most probably, you know, scanned how they were next going to make more money. They are working with us in a way, and they've invested in people to unearth their own research and history. And it is brave, but what you get is the truth of history.
Yeah. I'm going to take chair's privilege and ask you a question. Yeah. All these good people in the room, I'm sure, will want to ask questions, but I'm going to ask you one that's a little bit personal, and I hope you feel it's a safe space to be able to answer it. So this room is full of leaders, and more importantly, lots of future leaders. And I just want to know what kept you going, what made you lead and not just participate? What was it that kept you going?
I think it was two things. I think I don't see myself as a leader. I just see myself as someone who's, you know, worked really hard and stayed committed to what I believed in. I was born in a city that later on I understood was a major part of the African story and my ancestors' story, and that was really important to me. So it was listening to peers, and I grew up with the old peers who really demonstrated against the injustices for us as a community in this city. But based on their experience, they also passed that baton and that charge to us and told us to do it differently to them, to not fight and scream and shout, but to try and get into those spaces and try and understand the process and then make your own mark. And I think that's what I've been able to do. But I always say, and I say this to everybody, I'm 62 years of age, but I am learning every single day in this city, in this subject, and in our institution, as well as the many others that are partners with us. So I'm no expert. I'm just a really good listener and learner.
You're a good listener. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, questions in the room. If you could say who you are and which institution you're from.
Thanks, Michelle. So, Ed Fay, University of Bristol, thank you so much for sharing that story and your personal commitment over such a long time. It's such an incredible journey. And thank you as well for your generosity in uplifting us and shining a light on our role. And I'd really like to explore that further and how we, as libraries within higher education institutions, that are possibly at different points in our own journey of understanding our legacies and how that's bound up in certain areas and certain places. How can we contribute more strongly and more positively to the kind of journey that you've described?
Yeah. I think the most important thing is getting commitment. You know, NML got the commitment from the board, you know, and you can work in partnership with people, but if you're not sitting around the table or you're not getting the support of the decision makers in the institution, and it's a journey for them. They've got to learn as well. You know, this is new. For me, it's quite easy because I'm quite good at convincing people to do things differently. And I think it's the uniqueness of this next journey that is so critical for institutions, for cities, for the world. We have to be different. We have to work differently, and we have to tackle the truth of our existence in order to make sure that we don't refer back to any of those faults in our history of the past. So I would say commitment from the institution, and they can speak to Liverpool University, they can speak to, you know, the libraries in this city and say, okay, just share with us, how did it really go? They will tell you, and like I said, it's not been absolutely the easiest thing to do, but the commitment was there. So start with commitment and then open the doors, and you'll be really surprised how that journey will just move on from a basement gallery, a temporary exhibition, to what you've just seen. I pinch myself every day because not even I expected that much. I just wanted a permanent exhibition, and so did many others.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Any more questions? Yeah.
Hello, is that on?
Yeah.
Cool. Henry Rousel, LSE Library. Really inspiring, Michelle, thank you. I've worked a bit in the museum space, so I can see the importance of having physical objects, the interpretation of those in a physical space. Wonder if you could talk a bit more, though, about the digital virtual offer that you'll be developing as well.
Yeah. Oh, I'm super excited about that. Like, yes. I'm trying to see how we can also include the AI offer in some way. We're really lucky, you know, a national museum with so many teams. We have a brilliant digital and marketing team. So we are working alongside our digital team to say, and our exhibition designers, our AA, to say, how can, we don't want to be a museum of the old. We don't want to be a traditional museum. This subject isn't traditional. The links are so surprising between all museums and history that you keep coming up with new ways of trying to interpret and get the story across from young people to the elder community who were maybe part of certain parts of history, but need to understand the other implications of it. So like I said, we've got the £1 million from Lloyd's Registration Foundation to start to look at how do we develop a digital resource that can be used both in the museum, but more importantly, International Slavery Museum in Liverpool has always been called International Slavery Museum. There's various departments and teams that have worked with international partners, whether that was in museums, libraries, or others, communities. But what I want and what I really believe we should do, so I can finally say, okay, that's it, I've done it now, and move on, is the voices of the African, Caribbean, American, Haitian, and Brazilian voices. When their voices are heard and can be clear in our museum, and our voices and work in Liverpool is connected to those countries and continents, we've took it on another level. And I think, to be truthful, the only way we can do that is digitally. So we can start with the digital progression, and we can move into the delegated visits and the loaning of objects and the repatriation of objects even. So, it's a real brilliant, exciting time, and it's the right time. So we've got lots of plans in place. We've got lots of teams working on lots of different elements of how this is going to be very, very different.
Thank you, Michelle. Any more questions?
Over here. Okay.
There you go.
Hello, thank you so much for your, Elizabeth Williams, University of Edinburgh. Thank you so much for your keynote. There is so much to unpack there, but obviously, but I'm just going to ask a couple of quick questions. I remember when the National Museum of African American Culture was opened, everyone who was anyone was there, former presidents, and all of the superstars. And I just wondered, you know, when you open, do you intend to also have that government acknowledgement that so far hasn't been there? Will there be former prime ministers, etc., who will be there, personalities to endorse? I mean, obviously, I'm tongue-in-cheek here, but very serious about that. And then I wondered if you could also speak into a little bit of into the ideas around projects to link up with the many international students that are coming here from, obviously, Africa and further afield. You mentioned the Caribbean, etc. And then just wanted to say that as you were speaking, of course, Maya Angelou's poem came to mind, Phenomenal Woman.
Oh,
thank you. Thank you.
Don't make me cry. Thank you very much for that. I think the first question. Second week in the job, I've worked for 30 years in Liverpool. I've weaved my way into all the sectors. I know the council, I know the Liverpool City region. And I went to Claire McColgan and I said, Claire, you do realise that the work that we're going to do is going to require the closing of the Strand on the launch of ISM. And she looked at me and she said, so the Strand is that big road that you pass to go over, that they usually close for big key events like the Giants. And so we've started talking. In terms of who's my wish list, yes, I do want people who are absolutely, totally at the top of their game, who all people know. So, and I would love, my idea is that we have 4 people cutting the ribbon, not 1. A representative from Africa, a representative from the Caribbean, a representative from America, and a representative from the UK, to put that positive feeling back on that global connection. Personally, I am Bayesian, so I've already got my eye on Mia Motley, who I respect massively. So, but the thing is that I've got to get this story out to all now. And so I've got a wish list that's absolutely brilliant. And it is representation, it is black representative leaders opening that door or opening that entrance at that special time. Your second question around how can the international students get involved, we've already got programs where that is happening. So we've got the program like the Forum is one way. We've got our curators are absolutely linked to curators and universities around the globe. And so we've just created, like I said, the International Research Panel. So we've got some of the top professors and saying to them, it's not just about you having your voice. We want to hear your students' voice as well. We have the stakeholder groups. And whilst they're local at the moment, the plan is that we start to create and filter that out, not only to that side of the world, but also to Europe. There's black representation in Europe, and we also want them to be involved in this journey with us. So there's things that we've got in place where the students can be involved. One of the things I'd like to see is last year we did a freelance curator. It was like a training project where local people who had no skills, no understanding, came and worked and was mentored by each. I've got 7 curators in this field in transatlantic slavery, and they were designated to one of the they started off as community freelance curators. We dropped the community by the end, halfway through and towards the end of that programme, because it was really clear, and that's why I say to you, lived experience is a real learning curve. But also for the community, it was a real learning opportunity for how this museum works, how to curate an object. And what we did is we did a democratic process. So the 6 people who were involved in that, then they decided whose brief was kind of the best that can go into the gallery in 2028. So it's about bringing in those unique ideas of engagement, making sure that people know what we're doing, because we know what we're doing and you all know what we're doing now, but it does need to go wider, and being committed to creating something that's quite different, unique. Our relationship with the university, especially the likes of the University of Liverpool and Liverpool John Moores, is really established. So their students, through the CSIS programme that we're already involved in, is already linked. I definitely want to see, we've got a really good relationship with Brown University and other universities throughout the US and some in Africa, but I just want to see that growing. And the other thing is that I'll say is we cannot do this by ourselves at all. And I'm the first one to say it. I'm like, I can't do this by myself. I'm heading a museum that I've been a volunteer for 30 years, but I'm an employee trying to learn those systems that you all love to use in the public sector that are driving me nuts. I'm like, why can't I just go to one file and find everything? So I'm bringing something, but I'm learning a lot. And part of my learning journey, part of NML's learning journey is to open its arms, and that's what we're doing. And that's what we've been good at, to be quite truthful.
Thank you. And thank you, Elizabeth, for your questions and your comment. Thank you. Any more questions?
Oh, very back.
Got you.
And that lady. Yeah.
Sorry, is that? Hello, can you hear me? Hi. Yes. Liz Jolly from the British Library. Thank you so much, Michelle. Looking around this room and looking at us as a group of leaders and future leaders, it's very white. So can you share with us, sorry, but it's we really value any advice you may have from your lived experience of opening up museums and libraries to black people in terms of career routes. You alluded to it. It'd be lovely to hear more if you feel able to do so.
I think, I can give you an example. In Liverpool, as well as going through this journey for the last 30 years of getting into a museum and developing it, historically in Liverpool, you see, and you see from this building, lots of our university development, lots of the growth, and that was mostly because of the international students that came to Liverpool. And it was only up until 30 years ago that we couldn't get into our own university, and we're literally, the black community, Toxteth, is at the end of this road. So we created the Access to Education course, and that's how me and many others went on to get our higher education. So it was about having a conversation first. There's no point, and it is hard when you're talking about a subject or you're going into a room where, there's no one else looking like you. But one, as you all can see, I'm very confident. Sometimes people will say I'm too overly. But what you see is what you get. I am this person. I believe that every single person has something to offer. Every single person has something to learn. And every single person has something that can progress into a better society. But first, the doors got to open. And people have invited me to sit at tables. I don't want to just sit at a table like a tick box exercise. I want to sit, and I make it quite clear that I'm coming to sit at the table to influence it. Now, even if I influence it with one change, that's important because it starts to get people to think differently. And I think that there's other things that we need to do, especially around this subject. It's a traumatic subject. I've got black staff who are looking at shackles of children, and it's like, and I know that it's traumatic. I'm talking about a history that just sometimes makes me cry when I uncover stuff, but I will not stop. And I would say, build your confidence if you can, or at least be brave to go into that room and act like you are the queen of your city, your country. Have that open and honest conversation. When someone says to you, oh, I don't quite get that, or we don't do this, say, well, have you ever tried? I always say, my success with NML has been that I've been their constructive, critical friend with solutions. So I come to them with criticism, but I also, as soon as I criticise them, I said, but you can do it this way, and it would work really well for you and for us.
Yeah, very welcome. Thank you, Michelle. I think we've got time for one last question. There's a lady at the back.
Sorry, Shirley Yearwood-Jackman, University of Liverpool. As I sat listening to you, it was very emotional for me because I could remember myself. I could remember myself growing up, not being able to see myself represented, and me coming to grips with the fact that I wanted to do that. That was something that I wanted for myself. And the importance of us telling our story and for others to understand that story and to understand the implications of that story, not only within the UK, but globally, is absolutely critical. And I think that, you know, if there's one thing that we should be all taking away from this event and from what you have said today, is the role that we all have to play as leaders about how we go back and make the changes that we need to make in order to ensure that those histories are told, that the resources that we have in our collections are managed effectively, because they are the history of people that live in this country or live globally, and they have an impact on the way in which the world develops. And with that in mind, I want to ask you, how do you feel about the role of museums, International Slavery Museum in particular, in terms of supporting social, political, and economic cohesion, particularly within the context of the world that we live in today?
Thank you very much, and I'm glad that I will come and give you a big hug at the end of this. So thank you so much, and you for those lovely words. I think that the importance of what's happening in the world, oh God, I'm going to get myself into trouble now. What's happening in the world is crazy, and I don't think any of us were prepared for it, or, you know, we're proud of it. And so that in itself shows that every single person has to do things differently. We are obligated, really, to progress for something that's much better, a much better offer. And so it's our contributions individually that collectively make change. And it can be made in so many ways. I think the role of the museums and the libraries has been, they have been learning. They're the first ones to say, you know, we came out of the wealth of this trade that we're now trying to talk about, but how do we recognise, respect, and continue to develop and unearth the truth of that existence? And I think when you put your hand up and say, right, okay, let's do it. Let's stop talking about it. Let's stop scouring away from it. It's an important issue. It's a human issue, as well as every single human has to connect to history, their own. Now, it's really great when people can talk about their own history, but for us, as Black people, we can't, because we can't connect. We cannot put names to some of our ancestors. The lineage stops because the lineage was broken. But what we have to do is just keep trying to uncover as much as we can, to be positive, to make a contribution, and to create some of the work that needs to be done for the very awkward political discussions that need to be done, again, we have to be at the table and we have to influence that table, not just be the tick box for I invited Michelle.
Thank you.